Welcome to the Indigo Podcast, an exploration of human flourishing at work and beyond. I'm Ben Barron of Indigo Anchor and Cleveland State University.
And I'm Chris Everett of Indigo Anchor. For more information, please visit us at www.indigopodcast.com.
All right. So today we're going to talk about high school again and God. All right. High school again, an adult view of popularity.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Do you want to go back to high school?
No.
What about middle school or any school?
No.
No.
So we've been prepping for this episode. God, it was horrible.
do you need some therapy now?
Oh
gosh.
Even the song "Popular" by Nada Surf made a cameo in our research. We'll put a link to that one in the show notes for your brain cell killing. Oh my gosh.
But what's so funny is that, I mean, okay, so this idea of popularity, I'm sure many, I know I have, and I'm sure many of our listeners can look around themselves, here in adult life and see a lot that is still kind of like high school, even in the workplace, this whole idea of popularity. And so.
Ben, it's so bad. I think that it's so bad. Okay, so during all the COVID stuff and everything that was going on, we're like, well, let's go see what's trending.
This was depressing
on Google, and I've done this before, and it but it's basically a bunch of Kardashians and sports stuff, which sports aren't going on, so I guess sports nuts are just the Jones and like some guy on a paleo diet that's just like smelled a Snicker bar and. So I guess, gosh, I don't know, but let's, so today we're going to talk about in this episode, what popularity is and how it relates to the workplace. Mm-hmm. All right. We all know that it's there. How do people achieve popularity and what happens if you are popular? So, hey, if you're one of the fortunate few that just walks on the clouds, well, what the heck? What should you do? Or what's your world going to look like from the evidence, right? And then finally, what does popularity have to do with flourishing in life?
That's right. So why don't we just dive right into that first part, which is what popularity is and how it relates to the workplace. And I think the first thing to think about is just about how many informal relationships we have at work. A lot of times we think about how our work and our organizations are structured, and we think about that little org chart with the little boxes and the little lines that connect everybody. And if I ask an executive to say, hey, draw me your organization, they'd probably reproduce something like that. And yet so much of what actually happens at work is in that white space and is in terms of these informal relationships that we have at work, the friends we have, the enemies we have, the alliances we form, the coalitions we form, and the cliques that emerge, the frenemies, right?
Frenemies. What a term, right?
I know, yeah. So these people who, we're friends with, but, we also have kind of this tension of maybe a little bit of enemy going on there too. So, this is a thing at work, and it is a thing in adult life, of course. We see this. There is certainly a status hierarchy in terms of popularity, both in the workplace, in our social life, and so forth. And, I guess, I think it gets better maybe, or you have more control over who you associate with after you leave high school, but it is still there. So it's something that I think is relevant.
Yeah, and it's, gosh, this So I'm glad we're doing this topic, but this topic is really weird. What if you're lactose intolerant and you're forced into a discussion on the best flavor of ice cream? You know?
What the heck?
I know. That's kind of how it feels like, because on the one hand, I don't give a rip about this stuff.
Right.
Right. And on the other hand, gosh darn it, it's like I'm lactose intolerant, but I have to like eat and talk about ice cream, because you'll hit a consulting engagement, right? Let's just say. And we do culture work and interpersonal stuff, but sometimes it's just like, man, we got to get your costs under control here. And
Right.
and look, there's not some governance in here, but then you got to wade through all this popularity social stuff just to get to the goods, right?
Hmm.
And that can be annoying,
Right.
actually.
Right.
So
Well, so we're going to pull from it's interesting because there's a lot of research on popularity, but most of that research, almost all of it, has to do with childhood and kids in school, primary school, middle school, high school, and so forth, and in groups and out groups and so forth that develop there. Um,
cynical people are like, yeah, the losers grew up to get PhDs and what makes you popular.
Why? Yeah, they're like, I'm gonna write about why I wasn't cool. I really want to know, you know. But but as we talked about, this does relate to the workplace, and there's actually, not a whole lot of research that's been done on popularity in the workplace. The two most helpful articles that we found out in the literature on this as it relates to popularity and the workplace. The first one was an empirical study published in the Journal of Applied Psychology. Is written by Brent Scott and Tim Judge. And that was about the popularity contest at work. And then a few years later, Brent Scott published in Organizational Psychology Review, and of course we'll post links to both of these in the show notes, but he published a review article. And for those of you who aren't aware and reading this stuff all the time, kind of like we are, a review article is where they try to consolidate all the research and say, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, and here's what research should look at in the future, basically. And maybe they put together some sort of model or some sort of idea to try to further the research on it. And so Brent Scott published this in the Organizational Psychology Review, and it's called A Conceptual Framework for the Study of Popularity in the Workplace. And so we're going to pull from both of those. And what's interesting is, being popular does seem to have some benefits for the popular person, right? If you are popular,
it's certainly better than being unpopular, I guess.
Right. So if you are popular, it is you tend to find your job a little bit more satisfying, which makes sense, right?
Surprise.
Surprise. I mean, if you go to work and everybody is kind of obsequious in your presence, right? I mean, I think you probably
that's not a very popular word, Ben.
I just failed the popularity test.
Just put that on your long list of popularity failures, right?
Throwing out SAT words, right?
Oh my gosh, we're so in trouble on this episode.
Oh my gosh, yeah, we are really just kind of like with a flashlight looking in the dark, looking, because we don't know what popularity really is because we haven't experienced it, but but popular people at work also people help them more. It's like not only are they a little bit more satisfied,
the data shows they're satisfied. People try to help them.
They do.
Which why? They already got it on a silver platter. What are you doing?
Yeah, I mean it's interesting. So we'll unpack that a little bit. And it's people do kind of form these ideas in the workplace about who is or who is not more popular, right? So there's been research looking at, do people actually agree on who the popular person is? And it turns out they kind of do. And I would assume that this would vary by workplace, by culture, and so forth, right? We've been in organizations, this is just anecdotally, we've been in organizations that are, very healthy in terms of their culture. People work together well. people get along, even if they're not friends. They build a collaborative alliance with each other and they work forward on things together. And we've also been in organizations on the flip side that are
Ugh.
full of cliques, right? Where it's like
Right.
this little group has their little ringleader, and they do things together, and they kind of have their own agenda, and they stick together, and there's this other faction that develops and so forth. So people do agree about who is and who perhaps is not as popular. And
This is like the old 90s. I don't even know if this website exists, but there is like some version of the hot or not, right? I know this,
I remember Hot or Not. Yeah.
right? The numbskulls would upload their picture for
Uh-huh.
self-flatulations. Like if you knew you weren't hot, you still put your picture up there. I
Oh.
never did, but
Yeah.
some people, and it's like, am I a 4 or a 7?
You know,
Which is so
it's horrible. And that was just obviously based on appearance and so forth. But
that's my whole popularity. We were talking about lactose intolerance. I'm just going to use the phrase popularity intolerance. That is such garbage. And if you have kids, right,
yeah.
they're going to have to navigate this landscape. And
I
then
know.
you reflect back on it and you're like, this is stupid. It's
Yeah. Well, and again, and really, I mean, especially when you're a kid, it can be really, really tough to deal with, Like if your kid maybe is getting picked on by others, or, if you realize that, hey, my kid probably isn't really the popular kid, and it's, really, they're struggling with that. They realize it. It's very tough. And so if we go back to, high school or wherever,
Yeah, and then they just say, as much as I'd love to just get on my high pedestal, put on my cardigan and say, this popularity stuff is beneath me. I bury not my head in the sand, but my head in the clouds, right? You can't do it because research shows this has just as much, if not more, of an influence on our work lives.
Right.
So if you're an intelligent person who's tried to bury their head in the clouds, right? Yet you can't. You're gonna have to take a look at it. So
yeah, it's there. It's there regardless of whether or not you believe it's there, right? You can try to will it away or ignore it, but it is there.
And everybody knows. And so that's why the research shows, like, if you survey everybody in a workplace, everybody knows about the level. If you did on 1 to 10, oh, well, Billy's a 7, right? Like everybody's going to be, oh, I had him at a 6.8. Okay, close enough, right? Everybody kind of knows. So despite the fact that I'm throwing up in my mouth a little bit, let's go back to high school.
Yeah. Well, and you can think back to those experiences and either think I actually enjoyed high school to a large degree, but
Such a weirdo. God. That's why I'm working with you.
That's right. And this all goes back to some of the fundamental needs that we have as humans. Now, of course, we all vary in the amount that these needs drive us, but to some degree, we all have some needs for social approval. We do kind of judge how we're doing in life based upon the reactions we get from the people around us. So we develop these needs and we have these needs for social approval. This happens early in life. And you can think about it from an evolutionary psychology perspective, right? This happens for a reason, right? It helps us understand how to work with each other, how to work in groups. It helps us understand what's appropriate and what's not to some extent. That's kind of the positive view of it. Of course, there's negative aspects. But this need for social approval, it continues to some extent later on in life. Now, of course, as you move through life, you have the ability to become much more selective about the people with whom you associate to some degree, socially for sure. In the workplace, kind of, you're not, stuck in high school with the same people in the same class forced together all the time. So you do have a little bit of control there, but you do have still these needs for social approval.
Right. And so this is where, my popularity and tolerance flares a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So you have control of your social circle. It's like, oh, well, I can't be popular in this group, so I'm going to go join the secret comic book Dungeons and Dragons club / GeoCities archive website. I don't know. I was just trying to get super esoteric here. It's like, hey man, I'm a big freaking deal in this subset of 5 people on the internet.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and then you're like, oh well, I kept going until I found a place I could be popular. Well, I mean, that's just like a moving game of chess, and
Yeah.
that's my popularity intolerance just says, okay, it's super important. We have data that shows it, but really, you're kind of building your house on the sand here a little bit.
Right, right. We'll talk about that a little bit more, I think, later in the episode. But there are certain dangers, of course, with basing your self-esteem, your view of self-worth, completely on how other people view you. Right, that is not a very healthy way to go through life. So, let's kind of do a little definitional work here, and
Yeah, from the literature,
yeah,
not shooting from the hip.
yeah, from the literature. Uh, we're just proving how totally unpopular we are this episode. From the literature, popularity. This is from that article by Brent Scott in Organizational Psychology Review, and the way he defines popularity says popular, and I'm quoting: popular individuals are defined as those who are socially preferred and socially visible, such that they are liked by many, i.e., a majority of their peers, and receive disproportionate amounts of social attention from others. So it's interesting, and I've heard some research, and I think some of this comes from anthropology and other types of disciplines, just how humans are fairly different in that even like, the way that our eyes are constructed, we can very easily, for example, the white parts of our eyes are a little bit more prominent than in other animals, right? So we can very easily tell who is looking at whom. We can tell where people's eyes are focused, and we can tell who is getting more attention than others. If you and even from a very early age, we can pick who are those people that people are looking at, who's receiving that social attention, and those are the popular people. So what's interesting though is these popular people, they receive kind of this social attention, they have this visibility. They don't necessarily reciprocate that positive behavior back to other people, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've got a friend group here on my street that's awesome. And we go mountain biking together and stuff, and we hang out together. And, you look at the pecking order of popularity, and it's to that point, it's not necessarily the nicest person is at the top. And so this popularity thing is like, and not in my friend circle. There's no real douches in my friend circle, but the most popular person can be the biggest douche out of everything. And why? Like you'd think that, if you're on a plane anymore post 9/11, if some guy stands up with the gun, everybody's bum rushing him, right?
Right.
The time of, oh, I wonder what's going to develop here is we don't think that crap anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like, it's funny because you're in a social circle, like in your community or somewhere. And why isn't the nicest person most popular? Right. And so sometimes that douche is in that place of popularity. I don't understand, why does the group of plebeians bum rush the terrorist? Right.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Popularity intolerance flaring up.
Yeah, so, but it's not all gravy for the popular people, because, and we'll talk about a little bit more of this later too, but one thing that's important to mention is that they are also the recipients of jealousy and some antisocial behavior, right? Because people, they kind of resent it sometimes if this person is the popular person, right? Or they're getting all the attention. And so, if you perhaps are the popular person, you need to realize that this is going to develop perhaps. And it really can contribute, unfortunately, to some of these in-group and out-group dynamics in an organization. Now, could you have the case where perhaps like, a leader in an organization is really smart, is really competent, shows an enormous amount of consideration for everyone else around them, is truly a phenomenal person, Would that person also be popular? Probably, right? And that's not a bad thing. That person is going to have a lot of kind of social capital and a lot of power, really, because of their popularity, and for good reasons.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
I mean,
it
but
is what it is.
well, I know that you have like an allergic reaction to the word popular, but you know, you could you not imagine a person who is popular and also an amazing person?
Oh yeah, and they're out there,
Right.
and it's good. It's just the value that people put on
Yeah.
that, right?
Well, and I think sometimes if a person is popular and they're popular without even trying, like they're popular for the right reasons. I think that's maybe one way to think about it too, right? So, and I think that only develops in healthy groups and healthy organizations.
But I know, so like when I was deployed to Afghanistan, I had some soldiers that weren't popular, matter of fact, uneventful, kind of unknown,
Hmm.
but they did such critical work that nobody else would want to do.
Yeah,
And kind of thanklessly, and they just did it because of the substance of their character. And then you
and
look at some
that's fantastic.
yeah, yeah, and so it's just I just get really wary of being derailed
Hmm.
by popularity, right? And looking at life through that lens, which I feel like so many people are distracted, and that's one of the primary lenses they use.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so why don't we move now and talk a little bit about, why do or how do people achieve popularity? What happens if you are popular, right? So we've defined popularity as being this kind of combination of social attention and social visibility, being socially preferred. Um, so let's talk now about what does social science, what does the theory suggest about what makes someone popular?
Well, prototypically,
Yeah.
uh,
So
people
yeah,
who
so the first I mean it's this idea of prototypicality, right?
right.
Which is another big huge word, right? That basically says that this is a person who embodies those kind of stereotypical characteristics of the group, right? So they represent the group in a special type of way that makes them socially attractive and consensually liked.
Yeah, this is the idea. Was was Winston Churchill a good leader? And I don't know. It seems like people flip flop on the guy every 3 to 5 years. you know, he's popular. He's not popular. I don't. The whole idea. What did Winston Churchill carve his way up to the top through the substance of his person, despite the environment that was around, or was he selected by the group of people because he represented some kind of consensus about what that leader should be?
Hmm.
Right? The great man theory versus the kind of leader follower situation match type
Yeah.
theory.
Yeah, so I mean, you could think of prototypicality, for example, in high school, if we want to go back down that rabbit hole, and maybe even we go back to the "Not a Surf" song, popular. What does it mean to be prototypical? And if you go back to that song and look at the lyrics, right? There's this refrain that says, "I'm head of the class. I'm popular. I'm a quarterback. I'm popular. My mom says I'm a catch. I'm popular. I'm never picked last picked. I got a cheerleading chick." Okay, so these are all kind of prototypical characteristics of what it means to be popular, at least in that context. And so, that's kind of one way for us to think about it. Now, in some healthy groups, what might be prototypical is, hey, this person is works really hard. Maybe they are particularly competent. They care about other people, right? And you can imagine that there are groups in which that would occur as well. Now, I think just in general, some people there's kind of individual differences here, right? So some people may be more adept at trying to be popular. They kind of read those cues and do things, and they also maybe just care enough to try to be popular.
Yeah. So there's this essay, Ben, that I shared with you some time ago, and this isn't evidence-based. This is just this guy waxing eloquently on his observations, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's called "Why Nerds Aren't Popular" or something like that. What was the name of that essay?
I think so. Something like that.
Yeah. So anyway, one of the questions he posits there is, well, because nerds don't care enough.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you went to a nerd and say, "Hey, would you trade 10 IQ points to be the most popular person?" And like, I'd never do it. I mean, I'd ask our listeners out there, email us if you're like, "Yes, I would trade 10 IQ points to be the most popular person." I I'd be surprised if we get any emails, right?
Right.
But there's some
Well, we
people.
don't get emails anyway because we're not popular.
That's baloney. We get emails.
We do.
So, so the deal is okay. Like if you, I mean, right? This is just you just have to make conjecture here. If you're looking at how things, everybody's trying to kind of win something in this life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you can, what did one of the sergeants say to me when we were doing push-ups? Is we'd screwed up something in the Army during training, and we're doing push-ups, and it's like, if I can't be smart, I'll at least be strong, right? And some people, it's like, if I can't be smart, at least I'll be popular, or some of that kind of stuff. But some people are just, like everybody has gifts. Some people just have a gift of navigating that social space.
Right. And some people, may have the ability to be popular, but they just don't care enough to try. Like that's not what they are focused upon.
Yes,
right?
and that you have to be honest with yourself. Don't care enough to try, or despite your best efforts, you quit and now devoted yourself to the history of Paleolithic pottery, right?
Yeah.
You'll win another way,
So for example, what would this we've done a lot of thinking about this podcast. We really care about the content we're trying to put out there, and we have an intentional path that we're on. So, one thing we've wrestled with is, how do we kind of craft a brand and so forth around this podcast? What we thought about when preparing for this episode is, what would this podcast look like if we were only focusing on popularity? And, taking this idea of prototypicality, we would probably do something that was very prototypical of the quote unquote business gurus out there, right?
Yes, like mindfulness and quinoa, a thoughtful executive's guide to success.
Or we would do, so some people said, "Hey, you need to do like 10-minute episodes," and we're like, well, you can't really unpack meaningful things in 10 minutes.
This is the thing. Like, so Cosmo does the sex and relationship tips, or Allure. I don't know. What are the magazine? I used to see those things when I was in high school.
Whatever. You subscribe to all of them.
Yeah, they were great, But then O magazine came out, and I was only Oprah. But if a tweet long sex tip cured your libido woes, like we wouldn't have all these therapists running around.
Yeah.
Right? If there's like 5 easy steps to business, got it. Gosh.
Everybody wants that quick fix, right? So, if we were only focusing on popularity here with the podcast, we probably would have, topics like 5 ways to be amazing at work, or how to drive results with less effort, how to be a millionaire without even really trying, or things like that. And, because that's kind of what the characteristics of what, people out there are really trying to seek, right? So, obviously, we're not taking that path.
Look at Jack Welch, because GE was so successful, right? And so everybody said, well, let's go look at Jack. I mean, what did Jack do? Be like Jack. And now the literature has shown so much of the things about his leadership that were so popular and lionized at the time were crap from the literature. Firing the bottom, what percent? I mean, I can't even remember.
I think it's like the bottom 10%. Yeah, like the whole forced distribution thing.
Yeah, and so this is garbage. So if you got somebody out there that's written a book, and there's a lot, and I know some of these individuals that have published books, and they're doing their own podcasts, and they get the Ted mic that comes off their ear to their mouth. That's how you know you've arrived. So buy one of those to practice in the mirror with, right? All right. You think you got the stuff? Let's go through your thoughts on business and management and put you to scrutiny of a set of research peers.
Mm-hmm.
Most of these guys, it's going to be like a freaking pinata with a water, soaked in water. They're just going to fall to crap. But people, and I don't know, I don't understand why. If it was that easy, then everybody would get there, right?
Right.
And I don't know why people latch onto that and continue to buy it. And so it's monetizable, but that's a place that like I don't give a rip about being popular in that way.
Right, right. Now, getting back to just popularity in general, in groups at the individual level, there are some other individual differences that play a role in popularity. One of them being physical attractiveness.
I'm never going to get there myself.
But there actually is also an anti-attractiveness bias. So
you want to be the right amount of ugly for future success.
Well, I mean, you could so it could create kind of an in group where people are, they find this person attractive and they kind of want to be like them and they view them as popular. But then there's people who are kind of like, jealous or don't, find that's repulsive, right? So there's also some personality components here. So people who are more emotionally stable, have a higher level of extroversion, are somewhat agreeable, behave in some pro-social ways, right? Those types of things can lead to a little bit more popularity.
This is low on the neuroticism if you're a Big Five fan, right?
That's right. That's right. So, okay, so we've talked about kind of what popularity is, how someone becomes popular through this process of being prototypical of the group, kind of being that, they're looking the part. And, and I don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with some of that, right? If you're going to be the head of an organization and you're going to be very visible, like, yeah, you probably should get a haircut once in a while or, those types of things.
Don't wear a tutu to announce your quarterly results.
Probably
unless you're
not.
a ballet company, right?
That's right. That's right. I'm thinking back to, I had to do a big talk once and, this was actually in the military. So I was, there was going to be about 300 of my peers and, people who are senior to me, people who are junior to me, in this audience. And I was thinking about this. I was like, you know what? I think I need to get I knew what uniform we were going to wear. And I was like, I probably need to get a new pair of pants, just some that like fit a little bit better and so forth. And so
been eating too many tacos.
Yeah,
huh?
but I made sure, or maybe working out a little too much. That's what I think. I made sure that I did that beforehand because I wanted to kind of, present myself in a way that was appropriate. I think that's good. I think that's okay. But let's talk about some outcomes of popularity. We've already mentioned a few of these, but it seems like people who are popular, the research shows that they tend to be the recipients of more of these organizational citizenship behaviors that we've talked about in a prior episode. These helping behaviors, people tend to help them more because they want to be like them. They want to be liked by them. They also receive some fewer counterproductive work behaviors, which could be helpful. People are like a little bit less likely to stymie your efforts.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, we organize this way. It's just part of our wiring as humans. So
yeah,
get used to it.
Right. And it also can be a source of power as a person, kind of personal power, what we call referent power. So as a person, you can have power that comes from your expertise. You can have power that comes from, people liking you and wanting to be liked by you and wanting to identify with you. And so that can be a source of power for you. You may, though, become a target. You become more visible. You may become a target of social undermining because not everybody likes it.
That Francis is just getting too big for his britches. Let's get him, girls.
Yeah, or exactly. Yeah, going after people. Saying, this person is doing fine. They don't need my help anymore. I don't really, want to contribute more to their success or popularity. That kind of thing. It also can, one outcome of popularity, those people who are more popular tend to emerge more as leaders within groups because they kind of feel comfortable in that role. But there are some downsides here of being popular. And, the first one is that you are really under the microscope, because you are, you're popular because you are socially visible, but that also can have its downsides in and of itself.
Yeah, that's the whole I don't ever hear this. I'm sure it's probably in the literature somewhere. That whole imposter syndrome. Oh,
Hmm.
I just so fearful. Well, some people are flippant imposters. You know, they rode the popularity card all the way to an executive position that their intellectual and technical abilities can't write checks at that level.
Hmm.
And so, of course, they're terrified. They're under the microscope.
Right.
They're possibly an imposter. People talk about the popularity. Now, if you're a Kardashian or something, um, you like the gossip meal, right? That
Hmm.
that's that's something. So I've got some friends and clients that work out in the industry in LA, and they were at this one, in the film industry, television film. So they're out there at this happy hour, and they're just sitting there drinking, and then all of a sudden there's this big mob comes in, and it's Britney Spears.
Hmm.
And Britney Spears just starts dancing, and there's like no music playing. And then all the people are taking pictures. Oh, she's dancing at this party. Well, this was just a cameo moment. It had nothing to do because they wanted, oh, well, Britney Spears is out navigating these parties, target of gossip. So,
Hmm.
gossip's not always bad. It can fuel the popularity. Ozzy Osbourne, eating a chicken head on his concert
It was a wasn't
stage.
it, it was a it wasn't a it was a
It's,
I think he did a pigeon and then he did like a bat, right?
yeah,
That's
I
crazy.
can't remember.
So you know what? Someone needs to test Ozzy because Ozzy bit the head off of a bat and he did not get coronavirus, right?
Oh my
I
god.
don't think so. We need to test that guy.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, I'm not even going to unpack all the
Uh,
problems with that statement, but
anyway, so another downside though of being popular is it's a lot of work, right? You have to if you are popular and this is kind of hardwired into you perhaps, you are seeking that social attention, seeking that social visibility, and you're trying to remain at the top of that pecking order. And this can be a lot of work. You're buying the right clothes, you're driving the right car, you're saying the right things, you're showing up at the right parties, all of those types of things. Oh, what a silly world, right?
yeah, it's
Yeah.
what I
I mean,
and it's funny. And this is a dynamic. I thought about making this YouTube video called Parents Lie to Kids, a YouTube channel, and just go through all the lies that parents tell their children. And of course, in my consulting career, right? But like one of the lies that I was told is popularity contests don't matter.
Hmm.
And they shouldn't. You look at your kids and say your kids getting, and haven't had to face this because my kids are still quite young yet, but what if one of my children are unpopular or the punching bag of the school as
Hmm.
insecure preteens, teens figure out their place in the world?
Yeah.
Well, you feel horrible. And
Yeah.
you're like, that's ridiculous. It's silly. It's stupid. And really the best advice my parents could have gave me is like, get used to it. It's that way all the way till you die. Surprise, life stinks.
Oh my goodness.
But right, we have data and research to say that this is important. Pay attention, and we can't bury heads in the clouds or the sand on this.
Hmm.
But if those very popular people, if they start to slide from grace because of maybe they don't manage gossip in a good way, or
Mm.
they're under the microscope and they can't write those checks, and the organization they're leading, you know, falters, they can oftentimes engage in unethical behavior,
Right.
right? Because for them, well, what would I do if I'm not popular?
Hmm.
You're like, I don't know, crochet in Dungeons and Dragons, what?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's that temptation to engage in unethical behavior when they perceive some threats to their popularity, when perhaps someone is encroaching upon it. They may do some things that aren't right. So definitely some benefits to being popular, definitely some downsides. But to bring this all pull this up into some sort of meaningful idea, I think we need to think about, I think it's important to think about, what does any of this have to do with flourishing in life? I mean, this podcast, what we're trying to do here is to explore human flourishing at work and beyond.
And beyond.
And beyond. And, popularity is part of life. It's something that happens. It exists in the workplace and has some meaningful outcomes there as well. And so, the big picture here is, what does it have to do with flourishing? And I think one way to think about it is, this is something I've mentioned on the podcast before, but I think it's definitely worth mentioning here, is going back to Adam Smith, the father of modern economics, and the people oftentimes consider him the kind of the founder of capitalism, because he was the author of The Wealth of Nations. And but he actually wrote another.
Definitely a popular historical character.
Oh well, for sure he is. And but what's interesting is that people also who don't know better will oftentimes associate, Adam Smith, he's all about just like Gordon Gekko, greed is good type stuff, and that's a very unfair characterization and inaccurate. He actually wrote another book which is fantastic, which is called the Theory of Moral Sentiments. And in there, he explores, some of these dynamics of human behavior. And one thing he suggests, which I think has a lot of merit and is relevant here, is that he says that, and I quote, "Man naturally desires not only to be loved, but to be lovely." Right? So I'll say that again. Man naturally desires not only to be loved, but to be lovely. And what's interesting about that is you kind of break that apart. So, we want to be loved. We want people's admiration. We want people's respect. And we probably value respect and admiration from different people differently. So if someone who I don't have a lot of respect for respects me, then I don't really care. But if it's someone who I want their mutual respect, then that's important to me. But we also generally want to deserve that admiration and respect. That's the lovely part. We don't kind of want it for free in order to be fulfilled. And, he goes on, Adam Smith does, to describe how, there's kind of two paths toward being loved and lovely. And one is through, going after fame and fortune. And that's kind of the popularity route. And, he talks about the benefits and downsides to that. And he says, there's another path, though, which actually is better. And that is through the path of virtue. Being a virtuous person will also make you loved and lovely, and make you kind of popular in this different type of way, which I think is much more closely aligned with human flourishing.
Yeah. So when I was in school, I always joke I was more notorious than popular.
the notorious Chris Everett. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I was really big into guitar, played a lot of rock, jazz guitar, all that kind of stuff. I started the pep band in high school that was really popular, and at least I thought it was. And, big into computers and programming. I played Ross Perot as a kind of like gadfly during the mock debate we had at school. And, I was just, and so, even I almost felt like my peers didn't know what to do me. What do you do with this guy that's like just so into this stuff? And so I actually did have I think a begrudging respect. Like there wasn't anybody that wouldn't talk to me. But it wasn't like I was first called to the keggers in high school, which, underage drinking sounded really lame to me, actually.
It is lame, for sure.
Save that booze for the people with real stress in their life.
Yeah, exactly.
The adults.
Goodness. So I think one thing that we can take away from this, kind of building on Adam Smith's idea here, that man naturally desires not only to be loved, but to be lovely, is that, if you take a shortcut to popularity, if you do this at the expense of other people, if you step on others as you do it, you maybe engage in some unethical behavior, it likely won't work out, or maybe it will work out, but it's not going to feel good in the long run.
Yeah. I mean, unless you're some kind of psychopath, right? Sociopath.
Yeah,
Yeah. If
yeah.
you don't feel anything, okay, this
But
doesn't
I mean,
apply. But
yeah,
if
but
you're a real beating heart human, this should matter and will eat you alive in the long run.
right. And I mean, I think just I don't think there's any kind of comprehensive research on this topic because it'd be kind of hard to get these data. But when we look at people who are popular in terms of music stars or movie stars, those types of people who are kind of always on the path towards seeking more of this. It's a never ending treadmill of trying to maintain visibility. What are people saying about me on Twitter? Blah blah blah, and it's not fulfilling in the long run because it's a losing battle.
Yeah, I got to tweet just enough, but not too much because I'm
Yeah.
overexposed. But then and then I'll hire social media consultants so I can. Did I hire the right social media consultant to keep me popular?
Right. So, I think I think there's people who were like childhood movie stars. Definitely was a struggle for them. There's a lot of examples of that, and so. Seeking popularity in and of itself is probably not the best path. Because it is a never-ending, exhausting pursuit to always try to seek that as a goal.
Right, but it's challenging because and we talk about this book, The Chimp Paradox, all the time, but our inner chimps want social approval.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have your rational part of your brain is like, this is crap. And then your chimp is like, but we want it. My precious, right? You go full Gollum for that ring that is a deception.
Right.
And that's part of the humor, I guess, the sick humor of this life. And so you got to balance those things.
That's right.
The other piece that we talk about is differentiation.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, are you other validated or self-validated?
Mm.
And, it's interesting. So I live in Park City, Utah, and this place has, definitely some born and raised people that have been here forever, but there's also a lot of people from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they all came up in different social contexts. And it's kind of funny, at least I feel like I observe this. When I look around, you'll have like the jock who carved his way into sales and then became a super salesperson and made a bunch of cash or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got, the guy that started a restaurant, as a line cook and then worked his way up and got an investor and started a full-blown restaurant. And it's super successful and movie stars tweet about the restaurant. And then you've got like the Cisco consultant that's like high level on that. And all these guys have different social contexts and kind of what's popularity. And you'll get together for some of these neighborhood get-togethers or like community get-togethers.
You better not be doing those right now, though.
Right. That's right.
Social distance.
Thankfully, people in my community are very much pro-science on what you should be doing right now. But it's funny, before, all this stuff went down, we had to stay away, watching people interact because, somebody would be confident because in their group, they would be pretty freaking popular, right?
Mm-hmm.
But in a group where everybody has different rules, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
how's the kids, So this is the idea of like, so are you self-validated? You are okay with yourself. You are proud of who you become and all that kind of stuff. Or are you other validated? Do you only feel okay if other people feel okay about you?
Yeah.
And that, like, so that's the context that you should start looking at it. That being said, recognize that your inner chimp is still going to want that if you found yourself marooned. And I got to send an email to Wizards of the Coast. So for people who don't know, that's the people that make Dungeons and Dragons, which is the quintessential nerd game, right?
Yeah.
So
I wasn't that nerdy. Wait,
Yeah.
isn't that technically more geeky than nerdy?
yeah, I don't.
No.
It's weird because dragons and that kind of stuff used to be the ultimate nerd stuff, but now all the popular people watch Game of Thrones, and so where do nerds exist anymore? You got Harry Potter, Game of Thrones. God, they're being erased.
But I
But
think this point of differentiation is really important because I think
yeah,
there are people who I think so fuse their identity and their feelings of self-worth with how other people view them, where, if someone's being a jerk to them, it just destroys their sense of well-being. It destroys their sense of who they are. And, we're all people are all, throughout our lives are going to at various points disappoint us. And if you are continually looking to them for your feelings of self-worth and validation, that's a losing game. It has to come from within. And if you do find yourself around a group that is treating you poorly, well, probably time to find a different troop, right? A different tribe. And I think another interesting point here that's important is, do you really want approval from the people who you don't respect and admire?
well, yeah, and that's where you find. So somebody who's had to live. My dad was in the Air Force, so we moved, and sometimes I'd arrive and I'd look at the kids around me, and I'd be like, "What the heck?
Hmm.
What what is this?" That's ridiculous. But I still wanted my inner chimp, right? Still wanted that approval. And that's one of those challenges. I don't know if anybody wants to be, imagine this. Hey, how do you feel about this? You'll be famous for eternity, but you'll have to be a completely unappreciated artist for your entire life with no friends, and your wife will leave you because you make no money. But yeah, sign me up for,
Right.
I'll be popular for millennias after I'm dead. And right? I mean, that just doesn't feel good.
Hmm.
But the other side of that is, do you just want to cotton candy admiration and fluff and then die and never be remembered?
Mm.
And that I think everybody's going to have to decide. Some people's inner chimps don't need or have different needs for that amount of other validation, right?
Right.
And you'll have to kind of use your thinker there to find a place that you can thrive, that's good for you, and has that right blend.
Right. And I think it's important to remember with this idea of popularity, don't let your seeking popularity or what you're doing in life, don't let this be something that leads you down the path of low integrity, right? Don't let this rob you of kind of your inner life and being the person that you want to be. That is not a path towards human flourishing,
The movie Wolf of Wall Street. Did you watch that movie?
unfortunately.
I couldn't finish it because it was
It was
sick.
gross.
And I've
Yeah.
I've met those kinds of people, but I remember the one part where he gets written up for basically being a criminal stock trade in his early days, right, in the
Hmm.
paper. And then the next day people were banging down his door for jobs with him.
Hmm.
And there's some people that are unscrupulous. I mean, we run into them, these bandits, so to speak, out on the
Yeah.
roads of life in corporate America all the time. Low integrity. We generally turn down consulting engagements with those people unless they come with a tear in their eye. It's like, I don't know how to be a good person. Okay, we'll help you out. Any bandits out there, listen, don't call us. Yeah, we're gonna say no. But those are those things. If those bad decisions and lack of integrity, and you'll find people at the end of their lives, the CEOs and stuff that have ridden that wave, and they're broken.
Mm. Yeah.
Um, and they've left a legacy of baloney for their kids and caused a lot of damage along the way.
That's right.
So don't have a lack of integrity.
Yeah. And that's where it's really important, I think, to have some sort of North Star, some sort of compass in your life that you are latching onto and saying, these are the things that I value. These are my non negotiables. These are the truths that I hold to be important for me. And, if you do that, your friends will kind of self select. You will start to associate with, if you are true to those types of ideas, you will choose friends and they will choose to hang around you in a way that is productive. And I think just don't go down the path of sacrificing that for popularity or for business sake. When things are unclear in those times of ambiguity, having clarity about your purpose really matters. And if that leads you towards popularity, or if you become popular as a byproduct, hey, that's fine, right? But I think seeking popularity in and of itself is probably not the way to go.
Yeah, it's a mirage. That's where my popularity and tolerance, do you want to be, okay, so you find yourself stranded on Moron Island and you're with a bunch of jackwagons there, and then you're like, okay, this is what typifies the ideal jackwagon, right? And then you crunch yourself into that box and you go through because you care about pop, and then your most popular jackwagon, and then you're like, God, I'm such a jackwagon. Yeah, like, yeah, I want to go to like Intelligent People Island or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean, the people you are around really do matter. One thing we were talking about kids earlier, in terms of the whole idea of popularity and so forth, I think one of the best things that you can probably teach your kids, and there's some research to suggest this is true, is helping your kids understand and learn how to pick good friends. How to pick those people who they want to associate with, those people who lift them up, those people who help them aspire to be something better, and so forth.
Yeah, so I remember as a kid, my dad took a position in Alabama heading up a residency program or something like that. I can't remember
Hmm.
what it was. But I remember having a conversation with this kind of evangelical circuit preacher guy, and it was kind of interesting. And one of the things he wanted me to do was to not go to college
Mm.
and come be mentored by him in his circuit preacher lifestyle or what. And I remember looking at him and I'm like, there's just no way I'm not going to college. I mean, he had this really anti-intellectual bent thing, and he thought,
Ah,
oh, well, you'll be corrupted by the PhDs and all this kind of stuff, and that by just having that value of education, I'm not, I don't know, handling snakes in rural Alabama or something.
right,
Or
right.
another piece was, and I think this is the honor code or whatever for the Air Force Academy. I could have that wrong, but my dad used to say, I'll neither lie, cheat, nor steal, nor tolerate those that do.
Hmm.
And that's that whole idea. And we saw that with Crozier. Is that how you say his name? The
Yeah,
you know, and I don't know everything that went under the hood there, but this
that's
was a
that's yeah, that's the guy who's the commanding officer of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. Yep.
right. This is a case where he took his compass and followed it.
Hmm.
And it cost him his command for a little while. Now he's getting reinstated, I think is what I heard last. And
I don't know if
I
that's final, but yeah.
yeah, and
Um,
I don't know everything that goes under the hood, but especially as you move up the executive ranks, there's not a playbook for what Facebook should do. Now
mhm.
everybody has some opinions about Facebook, but for Mark Zuckerberg, he's going to have some kind of compass as he decides, right? You'll have to have that. So latch onto your compass early. It's not never too late to do it if you haven't. Your friends will self-select, and the kind of business opportunities and life opportunities. That's definitely how I met Ben Barron here. Freaking love you, Jack Wagon. And you know, because we're aligned on these ideas of integrity and how business should conduct themselves. And um, those your opportunities in your best life are going to flow out of that by latching onto your compass, your friends self-selecting, and you'll have a sail to sail you through that storm.
That's right. And I think it's also important just to remember, how you evaluate other people. How do if someone is popular for the right reasons or the wrong reasons? And I think this is where it's important to just take some time and try to evaluate people over a course of their actions, right? By their works shall you know them, right? Or by their fruits shall you know them. What they do should tell you something about who they are. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time. So if you have a new leader in your organization or you're new to the organization, take some time to figure out, what people really do, and or is it just kind of blustering and are they just trying to be popular? So take that time to really understand the landscape before you decide who you're going to associate with.
Right. So and there's personality disorders out there, and we don't know all of the ins and outs from a psychology perspective of, what causes this and all that. We don't have a full picture, but we know that some of this exists. And there are people that have massively antisocial behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
These are people who will stab you in the back and make you feel like garbage. There's this whole gamut of bad. I mean, we see them, business psychopaths, because sometimes business awards like certain amount of performance, but they don't care how much destruction is set behind those folks, right? So it takes a while for this stuff to emerge. So as you're interacting in the workplace and in your neighborhoods and communities, just kind of, settle in and observe. Eventually, these personality problems will make themselves known, but it can take a while. So be wary about that going all in on your second date, so to speak.
That's right. That's right. So why don't we recap a little bit here? Today in the podcast, we focused on popularity, and we tried to talk about how it relates to the workplace. We talked about what popularity is. We also talked about how people achieve popularity and how they do that through this process of prototypicality, embodying those characteristics of the group, and what happens if you are popular, some of the upsides and downsides. And then we wrapped up by talking about what, this idea of popularity has to do with flourishing in life.
Yes, and if you want to trend popularity and tolerance on Twitter, I mean, so be it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Indigo Podcast. If you like this podcast, please consider helping us by rating us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, telling your friends about us, having us on your podcast, or mentioning us on social media. Our website is www.indigopodcast.com, where you can access more information about us and this episode. Thanks again, and we look forward to talking with you again soon.